Welcome back to Regency Rumors. I'm Kayla, and here on my channel, I talk about period dramas, history, and historical fiction. And one of the biggest things that's been on my TikTok feed this last year has been male yearning. People are yearning for male yearning. Whatever you might think about The Summer I Turned Pretty, I know for me, I'm way too old to be watching that show, but somehow I was glued to it all last summer. And I feel like it's proof that male yearning in fiction and TV is a powerful storytelling tool. And it's what the people want. It's what we crave. I mean, we're drowning in rom-coms where the male lead either broods for just 5 minutes, is mostly a jerk, or is distant, or is up for a situationship, which, ew, like nobody really wants to see that on screen. And I feel like we're seeing it even in modern period dramas. So take Bridgerton season 3 with Penelope and Colin. We were begging them after 2 seasons of Penelope pining for Colin to yearn for Penelope painfully. Half of the season, he was so obsessed with being popular, and then the other half, he was mad at her because he finds out about her secret identity. And it just feels like the tension and the longing and the slow burn and the push and the pull, the yearning was not enough. Like, it was not enough in that series. It feels like writers have forgotten the art of male yearning, that like delicious, painful, restrained longing that makes you ache alongside with characters where these men couldn't possibly be interested in another woman because they're obsessed with the main love interest. And yes, it's fantasy, but a part of what we want to see in romance is stuff that's unrealistic to our own lives. So today, I'm here to suggest some of my favorite old school male yearning in underrated period dramas, where men don't just have a silly crush, they are men who yearn for as long as it takes. A quick note, I have not included any Jane Austen or Charlotte Bronte in these examples. You all know that there is top tier yearning with Mr. Darcy in Pride and Prejudice, and in stories like Jane Eyre and Sense and Sensibility with men like Colonel Brandon. We know this. This is about underrated male yearning from TV and film that you might never have heard about. Welcome to the first ever Regency Rumors Male Yearning Contest. Today, we have 7 eligible pining yearning men up for the title of Most Yearning Man Ever, besides Mr. Darcy, in a period drama. Let's get to our brooding contestants. First up is Under the Greenwood Tree with the character Dick Dewey. Now, this is a terrible name for a male love interest. However, when you look at this brooding face, does it really matter? Under the Greenwood Tree is an adaptation of a Thomas Hardy novel, a much more gentler plot than some of his other novels, but no less of a commentary about the divide of classes. Set in the middle of the 1800s, it follows the story of Fancy Day, yes, like the Reba song, who comes home to the Surrey countryside to her father. She's now grown up, she's well educated, and she's being pursued by wealthy suitors. Dick Dewey is a humble village laborer who falls head over heels for Fancy, and it doesn't take long for her to feel the same way. However, he has little to offer her, and her father is determined for her to marry well after spending so much on her education. What I love about Dick Dewey as a yearning male character is that he is fine with being completely delulu. His confidence in loving her, like, y'all. He is so earnest in his pursuit of her and is persistent and also a bit cheeky. He's willing to cross the line a little with her by touching her hands and staring across the church at her and stealing a little kiss. Throughout this film, while it's clear that these wealthier men are interested in her because of who she is and her beauty, they are willing to twist themselves in knots because she's also a financial proposition. Like, they are messy in their pursuit of her because of what she could bring to their lives, and it is so apparent. Dick Dewey, in contrast, knows immediately that they've got chemistry, that she doesn't have to act like some docile, stuck-up middle-class lady when she's with him. And he has no problem with pushing her to realize their intelligence and drive are similar and that they would be happy together. In Under the Greenwood Tree, she keeps pushing him away over and over because she knows her father wants more for her than just a laborer husband. She rejects him and she acts as if she's above him. But what I love is that no matter how she treats him or how the rest of the town looks down on him, he drifts through life with quiet persistence, just yearning for her with like full-on delulu, as if one day he might magically turn into a millionaire. He waits, he pines, he yearns, but he does not allow her to make him feel bad for not being born into wealth. He's this great lesson for Fancy that how people choose to walk through life, how they treat others, is sometimes more impactful than money and wealth and power. Hardy often wrote about love and class barriers, and in this adaptation, Yearning is shown through the contrast between Fancy's glittering options and Dick's simple but unwavering devotion. I won't spoil the ending for you, but I feel like Dick's drive to better himself and his assuredness in himself to be worthy of her and his devilish grin and longing looks make him one of my favorite yearning men in a period drama. And hopefully he would have made something of himself and the two of them would be like, a power couple together, rather than it being like she was the wife of some wealthy dude that kept her locked up in a mansion somewhere. So, I am hopeful, and I'm gonna take in that story for what it is. Next up is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall with the character Gilbert Markham. So Gilbert Markham is from Anne Bronte's The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, and there was a 1996 adaptation of her novel that was several episodes. The Tenant of Wildfell Hall is one of the first examples of explicit reference to DV and abusive marriages in the English language. And at the time it was written, it was really controversial in the Victorian era. Publishers did not want to promote stories which had such private matters. You will be glad to hear that the toxic marriage was not with our yearning Mr. Markham, although he's not a saint. He does attack someone for something. Gilbert Markham is a young farmer. He becomes fascinated by the mysterious widow, Helen Graham, who moves into the dilapidated Wildfell Hall nearby with her young son. Helen keeps him at an arm's length, and she's hiding her tragic past with an abusive husband. It stars Tara Fitzgerald and Toby Stephens, who goes on to play Mr. Rochester in the 2006 version of Jane Eyre, and he is great in both. I love him. You can just tell he's Maggie Smith's son. Like, look at that smile. The BBC adaptation leans heavily into Gilbert's struggle. He's jealous, he's tender towards Helen's child, and the way he can't seem to keep away from her, no matter how many times she tells him that it's impossible, is kind of really endearing and, dare I say, a little bit toxic. I wish more people knew about this novel. Honestly, Gilbert might be the most controversial inclusion on this list, but at least as he's written in this series, I love how his love for her isn't diminished by her past. Even when he learns she's been trapped in an abusive marriage, he doesn't recoil or treat her as though she's something that's tainted by it, the way a puritanical Victorian mindset might expect. Instead, his first concern is simply for her well-being. He wants her to see that she deserves a quiet, peaceful, loving life, free from cruelty and fear. Any gossip that might cling to her because of her past, he brushes aside as nothing more than old busybodies whispering, noise that doesn't matter compared to her happiness. His devotion isn't about pride or possession. It's about a kind of steady, unconditional care that feels both radical and deeply moving for the time period. So many period dramas revolve around young, innocent, pure heroines who are barely out of the schoolroom, their beauty and naivety held up as the height of desirability. What I love about this story is that it breaks the mold. Here, the heroine is, I think, a woman in her 30s with a history that hasn't gone the way anyone imagined. She once had the glittering, aristocratic marriage that should have been a fairy tale, but it ended in disappointment and abuse. She's a widow now, she's raising a son, she's carrying the weight of her past, and yet she's given a second chance at happiness. It's rare and refreshing to see a period drama that acknowledges a woman's scars and experiences without writing her off, and instead shows her as fully worthy of love and peace. The Tenant of Wildfell Hall is dark and it's grainy, but when you get to the heart of the story, though Gilbert Markham is a bit more intense than I would like him to be, he's one of my favorite underrated men who yearn. Gilbert Markham and that sideways hat is one of the first times I realized that farming looks very different in the UK than it does in the US, and I am not mad about it, especially the way it looked in the Victorian era. Speaking of farming in the Victorian era, so our next contestant is Gabriel Oak, and if I accidentally say maddening instead of madding, mind your business. It's not intentional, okay? Far from the madding crowd centers around Bathsheba Everdeen, again in like the 1830s. Don't ask me about these Thomas Hardy names, but she's a headstrong, independent, determined character who makes impulsive, self-centered decisions that are very rarely in her own best interest in the long run. But I guess it's good to see a deeply flawed main character, every now and then. Gabriel is a shepherd who proposes to Bathsheba early on in the story when they're both young. Neither one of them came from much, but regardless, she rejects him. Bathsheba then comes into some money and she inherits a farm, and instead of walking away, he stays and works as her shepherd and stands by her side through crisis, and he's never pushing and never demanding, and his yearning is patient and steady and almost stoic at times. She is chaotic and impulsive character who is contrasted by his selflessness and his steadfastness and his quiet strength, which is so attractive in both of these adaptations. He watches her chase after the dashing but unreliable Sergeant Troy, who ends up being a deadbeat husband and a leech on her money. He then also watches her be courted by the wealthy farmer Boldwood, who is socially, for the time, a good match for her. And regardless of how messily she goes about all these relationships, he puts all of that aside to work on her farm to be improving the land and quietly, yearn from her without constantly berating her for, making bad decisions with other men and not choosing him. He does eventually have enough self-preservation to tell Bathsheba that he's not going to stick around forever waiting for her, but I love how Hardy paints him as this constant man whose loyalty over the years is what eventually wins Bathsheba over. The power of Gabriel's yearning lies in restraint and in taking the high ground and being the mature man in situations compared to her gambling husband or her possessive older suitor. Every moment he waits in silence makes Gabriel one of the most enduring portraits of male yearning in literature and period dramas. Unlike Bathsheba Everdeen, Gabriel Oak is a 10 out of 10 name for a strong, chiseled, mature shepherd with a dog as a best friend, and he's taking care of little sheep, and he's chopping things up for her, and he's fixing the roof, and he's showing her how to sharpen a knife. Okay. Let's move on. Next up is North and South with the character John Thornton. I think Elizabeth Gaskell's 1855 novel, North and South, is one of the great classics of Victorian literature. And hot take, I think it's better than anything Charles Dickens has ever written, other than maybe A Christmas Carol. She was so much better at portraying the realities of the time than he was through his Mr. Fuzzywuts and Mrs. Paddlepits. That has now made me want to do an entire video on Elizabeth Gaskell and North and South. The BBC has given us one of the most iconic slow burn romances in all of period drama history. If you love Pride and Prejudice but would be up for something a little bit grittier, North and South is for you. It centers around Margaret Hale, who is a clergyman's daughter that was uprooted from her genteel southern home, who's had very little struggle in her life, and then John Thornton, a stern but passionate mill owner in the industrial North. Their clash between North and South and wealth and poverty and tradition and change is also a love story, one that seethes with tension and longing. So this 4-part series starred Daniel Denby-Ashe as Margaret and Richard Armitage as Thornton, and it features perhaps the most famous yearning glances of all time in television. There's this moment where she's driving away in a carriage and he's standing out a window with snow falling down, and he says, "Look back at me." And he's just waiting for her to look back at him before her carriage drives away. And oh my gosh, it's one of the most devastating scenes I've ever watched in a period drama. And I can visualize it in my mind right now. The way I would have been staring back at that man the entire time and then told the carriage driver to turn that thing around. Y'all who've seen North and South, you know what I'm talking about. And I know that we need to build tension in these kinds of stories, which is why she didn't turn that carriage around, but I would not have been so strong, okay? Thornton is not your typical romantic hero in a cravat and country estate. He's a self-made industrialist in the grim northern town of Milton, a man who's clawed his way up from ruin after his father's financial failures and tragic suicide. His survival depends on control, strict discipline, tireless work, and a stoic exterior that hides just how precarious it all really is for him. He is, in modern terms, the ultimate black cat boyfriend. He's guarded and composed and constantly fighting to keep his internal chaos at bay. That's what makes his yearning for Margaret Hale so powerful. Thornton is not a man accustomed to being able to indulge in life or just be extravagant because he's a nepo baby who doesn't know where the money comes from. He is always 2 seconds away from thinking he could lose everything and that he'd have to rebuild his life from scratch because he didn't come from wealth. So he's not used to letting his romantic emotions get the better of him. And yet, around Margaret Hale, all of that composure starts to crack. He falls for her deeply and almost against his will, with a passion that even seems to frighten him at times, which is just so, there's something like adorable about it. And then there's the proposal scene, and it just feels like he's almost desperate. And he confesses something like, "I don't wish to marry you to control you. I wish to marry you because I love you." And it's the way Richard Armitage delivered that line, oh my gosh, like you just have to go watch it. Like he is so desperate and like a little puppy dog, and it has nothing to do with the rest of the societal stuff that's going on around them. And it just is one of the most powerful romantic scenes that I have ever seen in a period drama. This is what makes Thornton different from the Darcys of the period drama world, where Darcy is pride and privilege, learning humility. Thornton is discipline and restraint, learning to surrender that good things can happen, even if you almost lose your dignity in the process. I know that there's going to be some people that are going to say he's a bit of a brash character and that he's too harsh on his workers, and I 100% agree, but I think his evolution over this series shows that he is someone who can grow and that she is meant to soften him and to see that the people who work for him are humans and deserve a level of dignity. And I think you see that change within him as time goes on. Now, is there real world examples of mill owners like him that were able to come to this realization and to treat their workers well? I don't know, but at least in this version of fiction, we can see someone like him treating people who are working class well at the end of the day. Next is Middlemarch with Will Ladislaw. So Middlemarch was a 1994 miniseries based on George Eliot's novel. If there was ever an OG Black Cat boyfriend, it's Richard Sewell in the 90s and early 2000s. This is Black Cat boyfriend personified. I still can't handle the fact that he's going to be Mr. Bennet in the new Pride and Prejudice. Like, we all got to brace ourselves. So Will Ladislaw is a painter who falls for Dorothea Brooke, a woman trapped in a stifling marriage to the much older, cold, pedantic, religiously pious Mr. Casaubon. Will's yearning is agonizing because it's so hopeless. They're living in a time where she's stuck in a marriage and he can't provide for her anyways. He admires Dorothea's intelligence and passion, but she's locked away in duty and respectability, trying to be the perfect wife for this gross old dud. Don't get me started on this character. With Rufus Sewell as Will, you see it in his restless energy, his frustrated gazes, the way he can't help but circle Dorothea despite knowing that it could ruin her. She's a married woman. This is very different than the scores of period dramas where the main love interest is a single young woman. Will's yearning is political as well as personal. He's a dreamer brimming with ideas about art and liberty and reform, while Dorothea is trapped in a suffocating household, playing the part of the dutiful, submissive Christian wife. Her husband is the ultimate mansplainer. I hate him so much. His wife is clearly smarter than him, and he's constantly talking about her being obedient by not reading too much and that it would be too tiring for her brain to learn like Latin or Greek, even though you can tell deep down he is intimidated by her intelligence, which is why he doesn't let her help him with his research, because she outshines him by a mile, the old bogey. Her husband is unbuttered, stale, molding white processed bread personified, and I can't stand that character. Dorothea's world is one of constraint and duty and sacrifice and a rigid social order that demands her silence because of her husband. In contrast to her moldy piece of bread husband, Will challenges her and he pushes for her opinion and he debates with her and he isn't intimidated by her mind. I feel like we are due a new Middlemarch. The music is a bit unhinged in this, and also kind of the graininess. I I think it's time that we have a new one, and I would be up for it if they announced it. I think there are other storylines in this too that are great representations of people who jump into marriage for lust or get into toxic relationships, how money and class can affect relationships, and the difference between our ideal of love and what love actually is. I think we could get an even more yearning version of Will Ladislaw, though I don't know how you beat those dark curly tendrils. I mean, for real, y'all. Finally, Lorna Doone and the character John Ridd. So if you are an Outlander fan or loved Blood of My Blood, Lorna Doone is the kind of sweeping, yearning-filled historical romance you need to check out. It is the same time period as Blood of My Blood, I believe, with, forbidden love between two clans. So it's a 2000 miniseries based on R.D. Blackmore's 1869 novel. The story follows John Ridd. He's a Devon farmer who is carried a torch for Lorna since childhood, even though she's part of the outlaw Doone clan responsible for his father's death. It's very juicy. They meet in secret, and despite their deadly Romeo and Juliet family situation, his interest in her grows, even as she is off limits to him first by clan politics and then by a surprising revelation that she is in fact connected to royalty. I forgot about some of the unhinged plot lines in this series. John is a steadfast character, watching from the sidelines, aching with the knowledge that his love could cost him his life, his land, and maybe even his future. John embodies that rare combination of rugged masculinity and aching vulnerability that we see in characters like Jamie Fraser from Outlander. Aidan Gillen, who plays Littlefinger in Game of Thrones, basically plays a similar character in this, and it's just a great contrast between men who want women as a conquest and men who want women simply out of love. This features a young James McAvoy and Joanna Froggatt and Barbara Flynn, who have all gone on to have big careers, obviously. I do wish something like this could have had a slightly bigger budget. There are times it's a bit cheesy because I think the production value wasn't as high as it could have been, but that's not because of the acting. Richard Coyle gives a lovely, passionate portrayal of a man who yearns for a woman who is forbidden in a time when, that could actually mean death for some people, and yet he stays firm in his love for Lorna Doone, which, look, the cookie is nice and all, and it's buttery, but is it worth all that? I don't know. I'm just kidding. There was apparently a 1990 version with Polly Walker from Bridgerton and Clive Owen and Sean Bean, which now I want to check out because it kind of looks unhinged. Like some of these early 80s and 90s period dramas are wild, and I really need to go back and watch some of the older versions of my favorite 2000s period dramas. Like one of my besties showed me, I think it was a 1980s version of Northanger Abbey. And if you have never seen that, there is some of the wildest things in there that I'm like, what does it mean? Why did they put this in here? What is this music? And in a lot of ways, it's iconic just for the way that they did it back then. So I highly recommend you checking out the 1980s version of Northanger Abbey. So now that we've seen all the contestants, who's your favorite yearner? Are there any that you think I've left out? I mean, I know I've probably left out some, but you know what? Too bad, because it's time to crown the winner. And shocker, it's not Mr. Darcy, because that is too obvious. Good Lord. And so, after considering all the contestants and the male yearning Olympics, to be honest with you, some of these characters, though beloved, are toxic at times, and they're dramatic and they're overbearing. So, the gold medal can only go to Gabriel Oak. I realize the bar is so low, but I feel like Gabriel Oak is the only person that can get this award because he's so constant and never has any sort of outburst. A man who stands in a field with his sheep, watches the love of his life make absolute chaos of her romantic prospects, and still says, you know what? I'll be here fixing the fences, feeding the lambs, and quietly loving you until you're ready. I don't know what it is about a character like this who, in some ways he's a little bit of a pushover. Maybe he should have told her a lot earlier that he's not going to be there for her forever. But when I think about some man just willing to mend the fences and wait on me while I'm making my dumb, college era decisions, there is nobody else that would win this contest but Gabriel Oak. Maybe I need, therapy or to look within myself and wonder why that is, but you know what? I'm sure I'm not the only one, so let me know who you would actually have picked in this list. I love a bit of yearning without whining, and loyalty without obsession, and devotion without making himself the main character in her story. I didn't include Austen men in this list because I wanted to focus on lesser known characters. So like perhaps some Austen men would have had a fighting chance on this list, but I feel like Gabriel Oak actually has a lot in common with another quiet yearner, Colonel Brandon from Sense and Sensibility. Both of them fall for women who at first barely notice them and instead chase flashier, more dramatic men who then turn out to be complete disasters. And just like Brandon, Gabriel wins in the long run, not through passionate speeches or grand gestures, but by showing up, by being steady and proving that reliability and stability and kindness are a much bigger flex than toxic charm. They're proof of like the slow burn pays off rather than declarations and tantrums. He's not flashy, but he is the one who endures. So congratulations, Gabriel Oak. You are the undisputed world champion of Yearning for the Regency Rumors contest trademarked. In a world full of loud, messy, and frankly exhausting fictional men, Gabriel proves that sometimes the strongest yearning is the kind that doesn't need to be shouted, just quietly lived every single day. Well, that is it for me, guys. What is your favorite example of a male character yearning in period dramas? My favorite male yearner will always be Captain Wentworth from Persuasion, but it's partly because he gets a taste of his own medicine. Like, he F's around and finds out by flirting with girls to make Anne Elliot jealous, and then has to watch her be the talk of Bath, being pursued by another man. So I just love like the smoldering looks and the way that he's like pining for her and like acting like he's made a big mistake, which he has. So yeah, that'll always be my personal favorite yearner. I am hoping this new Pride and Prejudice, with it being a mini series and like 6 or 8 episodes long, that there will be some top tier yearning. We shall see. I'm really ready for some slow burn romances. I think we're really due that after, like, look, love Bridgerton, but you know, the love and the sexiness is pretty overt. And so I think we're in an era where we're wanting a bit more of like slow burn yearning romance. And hopefully in this next year, we will get a few of them. So yeah, thanks for watching. Okay, bye.